Welcome to the 10 players on the verge of being busts episode here on That's Good Sports. I'm the speaker of football wisdom disguised as buffoonery, Brandon Perna. Today, I'm talking about 10 players who haven't lived up to the high expectations of their draft position and could enter the bust territory if they don't have a great season. I've considered where the player was drafted, what their production has been, injury, and the chances of getting a new contract with the team they were drafted by to determine this bulletproof list that I am sure not a single person will bitch about in the comments. That's good sports. So first on my list here is Mecole Hardman. Shocker, I know. To be clear, I think Hardman is a good player, but to make it on that Chiefs offense, you have to be great. This is a make or break season for Hardman. The Chiefs drafted him in the second round of 2019 with their first pick in that draft as a possible replacement for Tyreek Hill, who at the time was dealing with the domestic situation surrounding alleged child abuse. Now, because of those allegations and Hill's history with domestic violence, there was a chance he could be suspended by the league or even traded by the Chiefs. Now, the Hardman pick looked like KC was preparing to move on from Tyreek Hill, but just a few months after drafting Hardman, they gave Tyreek Hill a new 3-year, $54 million contract extension. Since that moment, though, Hardman has had to wait patiently behind Hill for his opportunity. Now, Hardman scored an impressive 6 receiving touchdowns as a rookie and caught a career-high 56 passes last season, but scored just twice. There are very few 5'10" true number one wideouts in the league. That's why Tyreek Hill is a freak. Essentially, Hardman, also 5'10", needs to double his production for Kansas City this season before they think about keeping him and using him like Tyreek Hill. After all, they drafted another 5'10" speedy receiver in Sky Moore and signed MVS this offseason. They are officially in throw a bunch of shit against the wall and see what sticks mode. And I'm not sure it's Hardman. Speaking of things that make me hard, man, today's episode is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Why would you do a fantasy draft in July? Well, Underdog is different in that once you draft your team, you're 100% done managing it. They tally your best scores via your best lineup every week throughout the season. You do nothing after drafting your team. You can play in 3, 5, 10, 15, 25, and $100 leagues ranging from 3 to 12 person drafts, or you can aim for the ultimate $2 million prize in the Best Ball Mania tournament. Now, I've hosted a handful of private drafts through Underdog, so shout out to everyone who is playing against me. I'll keep posting those links on Twitter, so follow there. But also, this is a great tool to prepare you for your yearly fantasy leagues. Underdog has one of the most accurate ADPs, average draft position for players, and since each game has a little money on the line, if you want to do a bunch of $3 or $5 drafts, essentially as your mock drafts, you will get a much better idea where players are going in the draft since people aren't bouncing after like 2 rounds, which you see in mock draft simulators. Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100 when you sign up with my code THATSGOOD. My link in the description. Again, use code THATSGOOD to enter the Best Ball Mania 3 tournament today for the big prizes. Next on the list, Tua Tagovailoa. Is Tua good? It's like the NFL's version of the Rorschach test the last couple of years. We know pretty assuredly that he's not as good as Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, but he didn't choose to be drafted in between 2 future Hall of Fame QBs, now did he? We also know that Tua didn't have the same level of offensive talent around him that those 2 guys had until now. I believe new head coach Mike McDaniel can save Tua from becoming a bust. McDaniel will give Tua something he hasn't had so far in his career: offensive competency and a fucking running game. His rookie season, the Dolphins had the 29th ranked rushing offense. Last year, they posted the 31st ranked rushing attack. Burrow's offensive line was bad, yes, but Tua sucked too. Essentially, Tua has a high bar to hit. He's gotta look better than Tom Brady, or Tua will lose his job to the first QB who can also get a senior citizen discount in 2023. We know how Miami improved their offense this offseason, but, and I know this doesn't mean everything, Tua still has a better career winning percentage than Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. Tua hasn't been what we expected, but he still manages to find a way to win games. Then I've got Jeff Okudah, the Lions corner. Now, as Will Keys and I noted in our Why Has a Corner Never Been Drafted First Overall video, Jeff Okudah was the highest drafted player in the secondary at pick number 3, dating all the way back to 1997 when the Seahawks selected Sean Springs at pick 3. The Texans just tied that feat with the Derek Stingley pick in 2022, but for all intents and purposes, Okudah is already a bust. Personally, I do not like calling players who get injured busts, and that has been Okudah's story more than anything. Also, he was drafted by the Lions, which is usually a 4-year prison sentence for defensive players. Okudah has started in just 7 games through 2 seasons, played in 10, and after an injury-riddled rookie season, tore his Achilles week 1 of last year. Now, he did manage 1 pick his rookie season, and the Lions' defense was terrible last year, giving up a 4th worst 31 touchdown passes, which means Okudah doesn't necessarily have to do much to stand out on that Lions defense, and I really think he has a chance to change that narrative this season because Dan Campbell, I think, is a good coach and will get the most out of a guy a lot of people have already written off. Then I've got Chiefs running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Prior to the 2020 season, the Fresh Prince of Helaire was the number 1 overall pick in a lot of fantasy drafts. Those picks didn't quite pan out, and neither has the Chiefs' decision to take him with the 32nd overall pick of the real draft. Now, the pick was praised at the time, but we know in hindsight that they passed up on guys like T. Higgins and Michael Pittman Jr., who went with the 33rd and 34th picks. Hell, they passed up on DeAndre Swift and Jonathan Taylor, who were taken within the next 10 picks. We've learned since this pick that the Chiefs can plug in just about anyone at running back and get solid production. Just last year, Darrell Williams, Derek Gore, and Jerick McKinnon were all just as good as Edwards-Helaire because, shocker, they have a good offensive line and a passing attack. Defenses have to account for every play, so you can't stack the box, which means you don't have to spend first-round picks on running backs. The Chiefs have drafted pretty well the last few years, which is why the Edwards-Helaire pick and his career have been such a shocker. But they're the Chiefs, so fuck it, they'll probably figure it out anyway. Then I've got Kadarius Toney, Giants receiver. Much like their big-ticket free agent signing of Kenny Golladay, rookie first-round pick Kadarius Toney failed to score a touchdown in his first season with the New York Football Giants. Toney played in just 10 to 17 games as a rookie under the guidance of Joe Judge, which is like having Judge Reinhold try and teach you about the law. You'd also have to be high to be impressed with his 420 receiving yards last season. Now, it is unfair to put a rookie on this list. A lot of this was not Toney's fault. It could be coaching. I think Brian Daboll will use Toney a little bit like he used Isaiah McKenzie in Buffalo. Just get him the ball in space and let him do his thing. Last year, Toney only got 3 carries, which is a crime for someone as shifty as he is. Toney has serious lateral quickness and needs an offense that's going to highlight that ability. However, here's the caveat. New GM Joe Shane drafted a very similar player when he took Kentucky's gadget wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson in the 2nd round. Coaching staffs and front offices tend to defer to their guys rather than the leftovers from the previous regime, and Toney also didn't make great first impressions with either regime, so he is going to have to split some of those jet sweeps, bubble screens, and handoffs with Robinson and possibly split from the Giants if he doesn't make himself unexpendable inexpendable whatever one this season. Next, this one hurts a little bit, Ed Oliver. Oliver is coming off his best season for the Bills on the defensive line. So he's definitely trending in the right direction, and the Bills picked up his 5th-year option, so he has a 2-year window to prove to Buffalo he deserves a second contract and can be a staple on that line. Plus, Von Miller should make his job easier on the interior. Oliver, though, has yet to become the dominant force on the D-line the Bills were hoping for when they drafted him 9th overall. I loved the Oliver pick at the time, but Christian Wilkins, Jeffrey Simmons, and to an extent, Dexter Lawrence have all been a bit more productive than Oliver, and all were taken after him in the first round. Simmons, far more productive. Last season, Oliver had 4 sacks, 48 total pressures, and 34 stops. PFF ranked him as the 24th best defensive interior player. He's never played much worse than that, that's the good news, but also has not entered the top-tier D-lineman discussion. Jeffrey Simmons in Tennessee had a breakout year, was a beast, featuring 14 sacks and 66 pressures. Christian Wilkins just eats up space and was one of the top run stuffers in the league. Oliver needs to command double teams every snap and become the dominant player we watched when he was in college at Houston. Wide receiver, Jalen Reagor, Eagles. Everyone who passed up on Justin Jefferson for another wide receiver is having a bad time. Let's just be honest about that. Jalen Reagor, though, has been particularly disappointing, and the Eagles have shown the willingness to admit their mistake by spending a 2021 first-rounder on Devontae Smith and a 2022 first-rounder on their trade for A.J. Brown. It's easy to pencil in Jalen as a bust, but I do like a redemption story. Reagor has only totaled 695 yards and 3 touchdowns since becoming the 21st overall pick out of TCU in 2020. Yes, again, 1 pick before Justin Jefferson. Now, Jalen Reagor dropped 7% of his targets last year, but the worst drop was a potential game winner that sailed right through his hands against the Giants. That's the kind of play that's gonna get you on the Giants roster, Jalen. Now, he can offset some of that disappointment if he becomes a weapon in the return game. He did bring a punt back to the house in his rookie year, and it could be his salvation in Philly. And I think he's a bit more suited to be that third option slot type receiver. Maybe he can step into that Cole Beasley type role if he commits. And praise Jalen Hurts can get through more than 2 reads. Broncos receiver, Jeudy. I barely want to entertain the possibility of Jeudy becoming a bust, but I'm gonna put him on this list just to be fair, because the production hasn't been there. But I guarantee he will not be a bust, and the reasons start with Drew Lock no longer being his quarterback and end with Russell Wilson now being his quarterback.
Yeah, pretty much everybody eats bread.
Jeudy had a nice rookie year, save for a tough game against the Chargers where he proved he could drop balls as well as he drops charges. But keep in mind, he played a lot that year with Jeff Driscoll, Brett Rippon, and hell, even Kendall Hinton for a game. He also spent 2 years in Pat Shurmur's hell of an offense, where running a go route is worse than not scoring touchdowns. So don't be shocked when he has over 100 receptions this season. Then I've got Steelers linebacker Devin Bush. I don't credit Vic Fangio for much, but his poor evaluation of linebacker Devin Bush may have been accurate. The Steelers traded up from spot 20 to 10 with the Denver Broncos to select Bush in the 2019 NFL Draft. Heading into 2022, Bush didn't even crack the list for the 32 best linebackers in the league on Pro Football Network's list. Hell, they had 2 free agents on their chart in Alexander Johnson and Anthony Barr over Bush. Bush was supposed to be great in coverage. He was decent at that as a rookie, but last year Pro Football Focus only graded 5 qualifying linebackers as being worse than Bush. He was 90 out of 95, and to make things worse, his peers have flourished. Guys drafted in the last 3 to 4 years at the position include Micah Parsons, Fred Warner, Darius Leonard, and J.O.K. His biggest sin is not playing well, with T.J. Watt wreaking havoc almost every time a quarterback drops back. No 5th-year option for Devin Bush, and if he can't grow, he will be trimmed from the roster after the season. or my preference, waxed. Fully waxed. And finally, I got a tandem. Jonathan Abram / Clelin Ferrell. Congratulations, Josh Jacobs. You're the only Raider drafted in the first round of 2019 not on this list. And you had a pretty down year in 2021. That said, Abram and Ferrell, even if you combine their stats, still aren't worthy of a first round selection. Now, Jonathan Abram has been one of the worst safeties on the field at most of the times. For a guy who can hit as hard as he does, he's a terrible tackler and a liability in coverage. Clelin Ferrell isn't the worst defensive end on earth, but he should be the Robin to Max Crosby's Batman. Lucky for me, the Raiders didn't draft Brian Burns or Montez Sweat, and instead watched Ferrell's snaps drop from 648 as a rookie to just 273 last year. He is still better than Jonathan Abram, and since neither are great, Raiders fans can rest assured Josh McDaniels won't consider trading either of them. He only trades the good players. The Raiders had a historically bad day earlier this year when they had to decline the fifth-year options of 3 different players all at once. And it's going to take a serious leap to get the bad taste of the 2019 draft out of their mouths. Tastes like a bust. Somehow though, still better than 2020. Thanks for watching That's Good Sports. If you like this video, please subscribe here. I got another video up on the screen if you want to check that out. YouTube says that's the one you should watch. Watch it, and then let YouTube know if they're correct.